Everyone, and welcome to weeks 7 and 8, which is actually just week 7. So before we start, you're going to maybe notice that there's something wrong with my lip, and I'm a little self-conscious about it. But I thought I would be brave because we all want to be brave, don't we? And I thought I'd just go with however my lip looks at the moment. It'll be getting better. Okay, this week we are working on stage 1 and stage 2 treatment. And for the rest of the semester, we'll talk about treatment. So the video that I'm making you now, you will be able to find here. Let's just go to, we can start with introduction. And so remember, I have 3 sections, and one of you might not have an introduction that doesn't quite look like this, but it's still pretty much the same, okay? So we are really want to think about practice, and we can't really think about trauma practice without really, and I think I've said this before, considering the kinds of impacts the trauma has to a person. So we know that there are themes of impacts or responses that people have to having been traumatized, but not everybody is the same. And there's a pretty good list of themes, which I covered in the last, there was an additional video last time, and maybe one before that, where I talk about safety and relationships and trust, and all those things are violated when somebody has been traumatized. And that's not just person-to-person violence. That can come from other kinds of violence too. Military, war, people that have been involved in a weather disaster, things like that. How we cope with that situation is going to be different depending on our already existing coping skills, the people who are in our life, the other experiences that we've had, and so on, right? And then we have to take into consideration also our neurology. Hang on. I have to keep my lip wet so it doesn't. Anyway, we want to think about, so how are our neurons firing? And that when we have a situation that's been traumatic and we develop perhaps running thoughts about it, we worry about it, we think about it, we anticipate it, we are reacting to it. There's a saying about how neurons that fire together wire together. So the more that we stress, the more that we worry, the more that we think about something, the more that we cope in one particular way, the more we are likely to react in the same way when similar situations, or what our brain might recognize as similar situations, come up. Now, the good news is that there is neuroplasticity. So we can change how our brain is wired together. There's lots of things that we can do that help with that. I probably have talked about how we eat and how we exercise and maybe some neurofeedback. There's some pretty good things out there. Breathing, heart rate variability. Believe it or not, our heart is related to our brain. Our gut is related to our brain, meaning our intestines. That's where our immune system is situated. That's where our neurotransmitters are stored. And our vagus nerve is directly, it's the longest nerve in our body. It starts in our brain, and then it moves all the way down to our gut. It's the longest nerve. And lots of nerves come off of this main vagus nerve. Okay? So why do we care about that? Because if we think about that and we care about that, then we can think of ways to best support someone who has been traumatized. Maybe if you remember back to 502, you had to watch a video with me in it, whether you had me for class or not. And I walk through a process of looking at a person from everywhere from what's in their environment, who is in their environment, what are their coping strategies, do they have any learning disabilities or intellectual developmental disabilities, do they have any medical conditions, do they have any substance use problems, have they experienced any trauma? And all of those things we need to take into consideration when we're working with somebody who's been traumatized, because if they are, let's say they're 30 years old and they were just traumatized, well, we need to look back over the last 30 years to see where their strengths are, what are their resources, who is there to support them, have they been in therapy before, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, okay, do they have previous trauma? All of that is critical to figuring out how we might treat someone's trauma. Okay, so we have an article that Dr. Barol and Andrew Subert, who's both of them are really quite brilliant. They worked with some individuals who have intellectual and developmental disability. And that has been since I was 19. Those are the folks that I have worked with over the years, including other people, of course, that just have trauma, or maybe just have a mental illness. And they talk about using EMDR with this group of people. Secondly, you will actually read the story, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, in the book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And then another chapter with Babette Rothschild, who really speaks about, sometimes we don't always know what to do. But if in the front of our brain, we're thinking whatever we do, we don't want to harm this person. They tell us something's important to them, or they don't feel comfortable doing something. We're not in a position to force people. Forcing people actually can reenact the trauma that they experienced, because in that kind of a moment, a person can be and feel powerless. We're using our power over that person instead of power with that person. And then, here, let me just turn this off for just a second. Okay, I'm back. Took care of that technology, so we're not interrupted. And then you have van der Kolk's book, pages 171 to 199. And I know that you're all very busy. However, this course is constructed in such a way that it is meant to focus in on particular reading that would help you understand not only why it's important to do what to do, but also what to do. Okay, here is a PowerPoint about flashbacks and self-harm. And then there are 2 videos this week. This is really an amazing video. Nadine Burke-Harris is just very articulate. And then Laura Van der Not-Lipsky talks about, after trauma. Remember that if you are uploading your technique demonstration, you're uploading it in 2 places. One is in the discussion, and one is in next to, right under major assignments. where there's one place that everybody goes to upload their technique demonstration. And there's also a mid-semester evaluation that's very helpful to us. Okay, so in week 7, because week 8 is typically a break week for all of the classes, you have nothing due in week 8, but everything is due in week 7. So you both have technique demonstrations to watch, and there could be anywhere, depending on how everybody signed up, 4 or 5 for you to watch. And then there's also a discussion. So this is the discussion for the technique demonstrations. I've had to email or message some of you to let you know or remind you that all of the assignments in this course are required. So if you are not able to complete an assignment, you need to get in touch with me and let me know. And that even if you take a 0 because you don't respond to the technique demonstrations, you still need to reply. The same thing with the discussions. You could be passing the course, but you won't pass the course if you don't complete all of the work. This course is so very important to everything in the program. So the technique demonstrations, you need to watch them and give people feedback, especially since you're giving your fellow classmates feedback and you've all worked really hard on this and probably stressed out, and you don't want to be on the video, but that's another reason why I decided to videotape myself with my kind of yucky lip, so that you could not feel so uncomfortable. If I could do it, maybe you could do it too, okay? But we want to give positive feedback or constructive feedback to folks that have taken the time to teach us about something. Okay, so in the first week of this series of discussions, there are 4. You reflected on the macro impact through satanic panic. In the next week, the next discussion, you focused on the micro dimension, meaning what's happening inside this individual, what's happening to them neurologically, emotionally, and individually, really. How does that play out in their emotions and their relationships and. This week, you are focusing on the boy who was raised as a dog. And when you read this case study, you want to think about, so here's this child who's had this experience. How are they affected on a micro level that will influence, and this is the emphasis, their ability to engage with groups on a meso level? So how is this little boy going to handle being in school? Could he participate on a sports team? What do you think? How do you think he would handle being in church? What do you think might happen when he is at the mall in a group setting? Obviously, he's at some point in the hospital, and a lot of you will talk about him being in the hospital. That's also a meso level dimension. So here we have, these are meso examples. Neighborhood. Do you think he'll have friends in the neighborhood? Think about that when you're reading about his situation. And then you're going to, as you did with the micro, you're going to talk about his physical ability, his emotional ability, his psychological ability, and his social ability to engage in these groups. If that doesn't make sense, please let me know. You need to use at least 3 references using the course texts, Perry and Salzwitz, Rothschild, and van der Kolk as citations and references. And then you're going to find one person, you're going to read what they wrote, and you are going to, reflect on their post. And then finally, there is a mid-semester evaluation. So if you would please fill that out. Getting your feedback is very valuable to us. You also have a chance with this to reflect on me as your instructor. If there's anything that you wish I would do differently, you can talk about that in the evaluation. Okay? So if you have any questions, please ask me. And remember, everything is due in week 7. So posts are due by Thursday, and then responses are due by between Thursday and Sunday. Unless somebody uploads their technique demonstration earlier than Thursday, then for the technique demonstrations, you can respond anytime. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, okay, anytime. It's the discussion responses that you need to wait until between Thursday and Sunday, unless you contact me and say, hey, I need to go early. Is that okay? I usually say yes. Okay, unless it's a pattern. All right, I will see you in the course. Thank you so much. Bye.